And it kind of goes in connection with what I told you Sunday. We're going to be dealing with the basics for this year, at least for this year. And this message tonight and this teaching is probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get through it, but it's not your typical Bible teaching, but it's a teaching that uses the Bible to help us understand and apply things that we learn on a day-to-day basis. One of the greatest struggles that people have today, and most of us don't want to admit it, but it is very prevalent in most people's lives, and that is insecurity. And insecurity, left unchecked and left unidentified, can be an absolute lid on your spiritual growth. And it could be an absolute lid on what God wants you to accomplish and fulfill His purpose in your life. And so we're going to deal tonight with a series, start tonight a series entitled Recognizing and Dealing. Okay, there we go. I'm flipping my own slides tonight too. But I'll tell you what, I'm learning all kind of stuff. So I'm recognizing and dealing with insecurity. So what we're going to do, we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about this in great detail over the next few weeks. If you can't follow me, I get to going very fast with stuff, and if I'm going too fast, just tighten your seatbelt, and if you need to look at the notes after it's over with, you're welcome to them. At the end of this, if you want my notes, you can have them. So it's a series based off of a teaching that I heard about 20 years ago by John Maxwell called Security or Sabotage, and I took Pastor Maxwell's teaching, and I've built this series around it, and I've taught on it in small segments around here down through the years, but I've never done the full-blown, and so we're just going to take some time over the next few weeks and do that. Coming in March, I will tell you this, I'm going to teach January and February. Coming in March, we're going to an entirely different format on Wednesday night. And what we're going to do in March, beginning in March, we're going to a family night format, which means on Wednesday evening, you're going to have an option to go to any one of about 7 different classes on this campus. And so we're going to do a lot of classes around here. We've got the classroom. We've got the rooms that are set. And so we're going to be going to that starting in March. I'll talk more about it as we get everything ready to go. But between now and March, it's going to be me in here. And I've just got some things that I feel like that the Lord would have me talk to you about. We can go a little bit deeper and deal with a little bit different issues in here than what we can typically on a Sunday morning. So let's talk about recognizing and dealing with insecurity. If we start with our inner needs, if the thing that we need in our life is belonging, if that thing is missing in our life, then we feel insecure. If we want to belong somewhere and we don't feel like we do, then we have this insecurity. One of the most powerful pulls on young people today is belonging, or the need to belong. And one of the things that I do know, and that is this, that the reason, one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons that we're seeing the rise of homosexuality and gay and lesbian groups on our elementary and especially our middle school campuses is this. Because if you have a middle schooler, or if you remember middle school, there's never been a more vicious season of a person's life than middle school. They have no tact, they have no filter, and they just say what they think, and it doesn't matter who they hurt. They're just mean. Can I get a witness in the house? All right. It's typically around then that the bullying thing really begins to come to the forefront. So what we've seen over the last decade to maybe 15 years is that with these young men, but especially the young girls, if they grow up into their middle school years and they don't look the way the popular kids look and act the way the popular kids look, and if the young man is not a jock and if he's not athletic and all this kind of stuff, then they begin to be bullied, they begin to be ostracized and labeled, and they're not finding acceptance anywhere except in these little lesbian groups or these little gay groups. Now here's the thing about the gay and lesbian movement. The one thing that they do better than 99% of all churches in the world is accept people. They accept people. And it's an indictment, I believe, on the American church, the Christian church in America, when the gangs, the street gangs, and the gay and lesbian movement does a better job of accepting people than we do. But that's what's happened. Some of what I was talking to you about Sunday with our influence that we've lost as the church in America is because instead of reaching out to people and pulling them in and accepting them, regardless of what's going on in their life, which is what Jesus did for all of us. And you look through all the Gospels, this is what you see. Instead, what we've done for the last 50 or 60 years is yell at that from the outside and call them sinners and you're going to hell and all this kind of stuff. And the truth of the matter is, that's not our call. That's not our call. Our call is to take people wherever they are, do the same thing with them that Jesus did for us, and love them regardless. Love them, love them, love them. But if you are a person who that inner need is belonging, if that's missing, then you have these insecurities in your life. Now, insecurities are not always there, but the common symptoms of this type of individual is that there's an overcompensation. And you walk through life with emotional lows and highs. If someone pays a little bit of attention to you because you're craving that belonging, if they pay a little attention, then your emotions are kind of high and you feel good. But then in an instant, if that person doesn't connect with you the way you feel like they should, or if they unfriend you on Facebook, then you go into this emotional low. Am I making sense? Okay. So that's the first piece of this. The next piece is this. If my need inside of me is worth, if that's an inner need in my life, if that's missing, then I feel inferior to others. And I deal with that inferiority. And the symptoms of that inferiority is that we're very competitive. We have self-doubt, and we need recognition. And for a lot of people, this is where they live. They live with a low feeling of self-worth. They have very low self-esteem. They feel inferior to everybody they come in touch with, in contact with. And as a result of that, they have an over-exaggerated attitude of competition, feeling of competition. And they doubt themselves constantly. Constantly. Look, I'm not talking about something that happens if you had a loss in your life. Everybody goes through it. If you have something that happens and a mistake in your life or something like that, or a failure, we all have those. And I'm not talking about someone that just goes through that, recognizes it, and moves past it. We all have moments of self-doubt. We all do. But what I'm talking about with insecurity is someone who is lacking that understanding of what they're worth, truly worth. And the feelings of inferiority, it's not inferiority to something, it's inferiority to everybody. It doesn't matter whether they're just inferior. They have that feeling that I'm not worthy of anything, I'm worse than anybody else, and so they compete internally, jockey for position, if you will, as they can, and they struggle with that self-doubt, and they have that need for recognition. And so that's another piece of this. If your inner need is competence, then if it's missing in your life, then you have these feelings of inadequacy. You feel like you're inadequate. You feel like you don't measure up to anything. And the common symptoms of someone that's struggling with this is that they compare themselves to, not everybody, but to specific people. It's not like the previous one where they just feel inferior to everybody. But in this situation, they compare themselves to specific people, and they become defensive in their attitude about what they perceive as their inadequacies. And it's this type of person that will, and I've taught this before about the crab syndrome. It's a leadership principle, but here's the basis of that. If you've never heard this, here's the basis of it. If you take two crabs and you put them in a box, neither one of them will get out. You put one crab in a box, he'll crawl out. You put two in there, neither one of them will, because the moment that one of the crabs begin to crawl up the side to get out, the other one crawls up and grabs them back and drags them in there. I've seen this principle with my own eyes. You can go out here in the bays and the bayous of this area, and you can take a styrofoam ice chest with a light in the evening, and you go out there and start collecting blue crabs. If you get more than one in that cooler, you don't have to put a lid on it, because they will not get out. They will not get out. This is what happens here. They compare themselves to specific people. They become defensive in their attitudes. And what they do, instead of trying to get themselves to a place to build themselves up, they begin to tear everybody else down. And that's what happens when there's issues of competency in their lives. And so they feel the inadequacy. And then the other piece is this. If your inner need is purpose, if that's missing, then you feel like you're illegitimate. You feel like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know where I came from. I don't know where I'm going. All those kind of things are connected to this inner need of purpose. The common symptoms of someone that's struggling with this is that they're compulsive, and they're spirit-driven. They deal with defeat and depression constantly. And one of the things that I read in I can't think of the guy's name now, but he was in the concentration camps, and the book is called Man's Search for Meaning. And he was telling of his experiences in the concentration camps during World War II. And he said the thing that he realized while he was there, what the Germans were doing to him and to the people in that particular concentration camp was they gave them meaningless tasks. It would be like, take this load of logs and move them across the street. Now, move those logs back across the street. And so all they did every day was that type of menial task. It had no meaning. It wasn't building anything. It was meant to tear them down. That was the sole purpose of that. If you are going through life and you feel like in your life that you have no purpose for existing, that you're just going through the motions and your life is meaningless and what you're doing is meaningless, then you're going to deal with a defeated attitude, you're going to deal with depression, you're going to deal with a compulsive spirit, and you're going to be driven by that compulsive spirit. And it's a dangerous thing to be, and it plays into insecurities. All right? So with that being said, how do we recognize insecurity? How do we recognize it? All this is going to be all these words will start with a C as we go through it. But the first one is this. It begins with comparison. It begins with comparison. You compare yourself to others and you rate your achievements against theirs. You compare yourself to others. You don't rate yourself based on your own merit and your own worthiness and what you yourself can accomplish and the goal that you set for yourself. You could be meeting every goal of your life, but if you're dealing with this comparison game, then you're looking at what everybody else does. And you base your life, and you'll begin to make decisions for your life on what other people are doing. And it's a dangerous, dangerous place to be because it's not about that. The only comparison that we are supposed to do as children of God is we're supposed to compare our life to the life of Jesus Christ. He's the standard. Not another human being. Other human beings are not the standard. Jesus is the standard. That's how we work through this piece. The danger here is that you ignore the unique roles that you and others play on the team. It goes back to the teaching that Paul did to the church at Corinth about the body. The body is many parts. It's one body, but it's many parts. And all the parts are needed to bring unity to the body. And he goes into that whole concept of the foot can't say to the hand, I don't need you, I don't want you, and the parts that seem to be less honorable is upon those that we bestow more honor and all this kind of stuff. The problem with that is because of the culture that we live in is so competitive and it's so image-driven that we find ourselves in this comparison game sometimes because we don't even realize that we got there. Sometimes it happens because of corporate America, and you've got to climb the ladder, and you've got to make strides and all this kind of stuff. It happens in the church world among pastors because it's all about who's going to have the biggest church, who's going to have the biggest extravaganza, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. And it's the same concept in the church world that it is in the secular world. But what about in our day-to-day life? What about Christians? What about Christians who go to church? What about Christians who go to church on Wednesday nights in Niceville? Do we fall into that same thing? We can. How many times have we ever done this? I wish I had as much of the Spirit of God in my life as that person over there did. I wish I could teach like that person teaches. Oh, I wish that I could do this the way that person. I wish I could prophesy like that person. I wish I could do this, have this gift in my life. Do you understand? That's not a healthy desire. Because the gifts are given as the Spirit wills. The gifts are given as we need them in our life. And we are to steward those things, not in comparison to what somebody else does, but in comparison to what the standard of God's Word is. and how they're to be operated. You are uniquely you. There's not another person on this earth that has your DNA. God created you the way that he did. He knit you together in your mother's womb. And all of our fallenness and everything else, we are still unique. And we have a role to play that only we can fulfill totally. Now, if we do not do what God calls us to do, ultimately in our life, and we don't fulfill his divine purpose for us, does that mean that God's purpose is thwarted? No. It just means he will raise up a person or persons that will accomplish that task. God doesn't lose. We may miss out, but God doesn't lose. And so when we begin to compare ourselves to others, we ignore the role that we've been called to play. And we ignore the role that others play on the team. The problem for a lot of us is really, it's kind of like Matthew 20, and you can write this down as a reference. Matthew 20, the vineyard workers. Remember that story in the New Testament where Jesus taught about the workmen? The boss went and hired these guys early in the morning and brought them to his vineyard, said, I want you to work in my vineyard. A few hours later, he went back, and there was some more guys standing out there in front of the employment office. He said, hey, come on, I want you to work for me. So they went and worked for him for that part of the day. 3 hours later, he goes and does the same thing. And right up until the 11th hour of the workday, he goes back and hires some more guys and said, come work for me. At the end of the day, they all get paid the exact same thing. The guys that got hired first are mad because the guys that only worked an hour got the same pay that they did for working 12. And so they complained to the boss, and the boss says, did I not agree to pay you this for this? They said, yes, you did. Then it's no business of yours what other people get to pay. I'm the boss. I have the right to pay whatever. If I choose to pay everybody the same, even though they work less, what business is of that of yours? Now, if we're comparing our life to things, then we have these issues, just like the vineyard workers. We ignore God's grace toward us and become preoccupied with the status of others. We don't think about what God's done for us because we're focusing on what is happening in other people's lives. If they get blessed, we feel like we should get blessed. Grumbling and complaining about the perceived inequities. Well, you didn't let me do this or you didn't let me do that. So you're not treating me fairly. We do that with God, don't we? Well, God, I see this person over here. They're being blessed. They're being prospered unbelievably, and I'm wallowing in poverty and struggling to make ends meet, and I don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand. It's just not fair, God. And what's the Lord saying through the parable of the vineyard? It's none of your business what's going on in their life. You live your life. God said he would take care of you. Are you trusting him? Don't grumble and complain about what's happening in someone else's life. That's the comparison game, and it's a part of being insecure in who you are. Judging others as less worthy of blessing than you are. Well, they shouldn't have got that. I should have done that. After all, I read 6 verses this month. And because I read 6, they probably only read 5. Or, why did they get to teach in the big room? Why did they get to do this? Why did they get to sing a song? Why did they get to... It plays nothing into the Christian life. We judge others as less worthy of blessings than we are. We feel like that we are the ones that should be getting those blessings. It's a problem. Assuming you deserve more because your focus is on your work and not God. Now let me ask you a question here. Remember, we're talking about basic now. We're still basic. But let me ask you a question. What's more important? Changing smelly, dirty, nasty diapers in that nursery over there, or singing a solo on the praise team on the platform? What's more important? Taking care of our babies and our children, working with our teenagers, or teaching a class of adults? There is no difference in the importance. It's all needed. It's all a part of God's work. But yet, we begin to have a change of attitude about things. We have attitudes like, I work with kids all day long. I'm not going to come to church and work with them things. I have my own kids to deal with. I don't want to deal with somebody else's kids. What are you doing? You're focusing on the work and not on God's kingdom. Amen? You see where I'm coming from here? We should not look at life and go, I only want to do this in the kingdom. We should say, God, where do you need me? And wherever there's a need, I will stand in the gap. If babies need their diaper changed, and I'm telling you right now, for me to change a dirty diaper, my wife will tell you, just a few weeks ago, we had our grandsons, and Connor's 2, still in diapers, and she was busy in the back of the house, and he messed up his diaper. And I waited as long as I possibly could, but this little guy is my shadow. He's like a growth on my body when he's around me. And he was trying to crawl up in my lap, and I'm going, son, you stink. And I'm just, good night. And so Kim can't come, so I'm going, I'll change this diaper. The next thing I hear, Kim hears in the back is, bleh. I mean, I'm gagging constantly. But I did that with my own kids. But if I'm in a situation and we have a hole in our nursery over there in that little children's room, and I'm not on this pulpit on a Sunday morning, and there's an opening over there, and I have an opportunity to fill that, then what should I be able to do? Do it. Do it. You see, this is the thing. Assuming that you deserve more. This is the parable of the vineyard in a nutshell. Assuming you deserve more, you focus on the work and not on God. Now, if we really had to look biblically at what is the most important work in the church, biblically it has to be caring for little ones. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Here's what I believe. That we should never have a shortage of children's workers in a church that claims to be Christian ever anywhere. Because we should be standing in line making sure that our children have care and they are shown the love of Jesus Christ. The problem is that we grow up to a point and we lose the ability to understand that it's not about the work, it's about the kingdom. It's about God. And that's what happens if we're playing the comparison game. That's where we get stuck. Look at what Jesus said. Oh, the next one is this. Forgetting that all reward and blessings of our life are due to the grace of God. Everything. Everything. Look at this passage. When Peter saw him, he asked, Lord, what about him? And Jesus answered it, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? At the end of the day, you follow me. And that's where we all should be. Well, what about those that are teaching the adult? What about those that get to sing? What about those that get to prophesy? What about those that get to do this kind of stuff? What about those that... It's not about that. You follow Jesus. You follow Jesus. Plain and simple. Don't fall into the comparison game. All right? The next one, compensation. How do we recognize this? Comparison, we've talked about that. Let's talk about compensation now. Compensation is like this. You feel like a victim and attempt to compensate for your losses or your inferiority. You've made mistakes. You've had things, you've been offended. And you live in a victim mentality, and so with that victim mentality that's going through your head, you're overcompensated for your losses, and you have this inferiority in your life that you're never going to measure up to what you think you can be. The problem with that is this, that you fail to trust God's control by taking matters into your own hands. Instead of waiting on God and trusting Him to control the life and to walk in His will and all this, you begin to take matters into your own hands, and you force issues. You force issues. and you overcompensate for where you feel weak. And it creates all kind of issues in our life when we're in this compensation piece of things. We see this very clearly with Jacob in Genesis 27 and Genesis 32. Jacob, remember, he's one of the 12. You know, he's the father of the 12 and all this kind of stuff. But he deceives his brother. He steals his brother's birthright. Deceives his father and steals his brother's birthright, Esau. And when you read Genesis 27, you see how he and his mom put this scheme together and how they did it. And then he went all the way through the whole 9 yards. Stole it from his brother, but deceived his dad. Because his dad was at a place of age, and he was blind, and he couldn't really see anything. And so they went through this elaborate ruse of how they were going to do this, and he did it. So what do we see? We see Jacob scheming about how to get ahead and gain recognition. How's he going to do that? How's he going to gain the recognition? How is he going to get ahead? How does he want to become the firstborn and have the blessing of the firstborn? And when you read that story, his father blessed him as the firstborn and said to Esau, who came and said, "Bless me, Father," he said, "Your brother has been blessed, and he shall be blessed." He shall be blessed. He stole it, but he's going to be blessed because it was spoken over him. But we look at Jacob, and we see all through his life how he began to scheme and how to do what he needed to do to gain the recognition, even when he's running from his brother. Depends on personal politics to advance himself. You make yourself look better than you are, or you make others look worse than you think you are. And in an election year where we're living right now, wow. Failing to recognize God's blessings while you're pursuing more. See, one of the problems that we have when we get into this more mentality is that we fail to remember where we came from, and we fail to remember God's blessings on our life. And we don't see the things that God's blessed us with. We don't see the reality because we don't remember or allow ourselves to remember or choose to remember, however you want to say it, where we came from. And a lot of times we go, well, we're not going to live in the past. It's not about living in the past. It's really not. It's about looking back and seeing the faithfulness of God at certain junctures in our life and acknowledging that faithfulness with thanksgiving. There's a difference than looking back and going, oh, I wish it was the way it was in Mayberry 49 years ago. Or I wish it was the way it was at the turn of the century when Azusa Street erupted and all the brush arbors and all the small churches that sprung up in the holiness movement and everybody was speaking in tongues. I wish we could go back to That's not the way to do that. Acknowledging the faithfulness of God with thanksgiving is what we are supposed to be doing. But we do that while we're moving further in God. If all we're doing is pursuing more for our own recognition and our own advantage, then we're missing the point. It's a recognition of the past with an eye on the future. And acknowledging the faithfulness of God with thanksgiving as we move further and further into a deeper move of God and a deeper relationship with God and new experiences with God. There's a reason why God talks about his mercies being new every morning. There's a reason for that. That God doesn't want us to stay where we are. He doesn't want us to stay in our past, but we can't forget that. You go through the book of Judges, what do you see? You see a generation from one place that you see a generation that comes up and they forgot. And because they forgot, they didn't acknowledge, and so they get in trouble. When we forget God's faithfulness in our pursuit to have more and experience more, we get in trouble. We get in trouble with it. We fight in irrational battles to get what we think we deserve. You say, well, did Jacob do that? You're talking about when he fought the angel? And no, I'm not talking about that. Jacob fought irrational battles all through his life. leading up to the night before he met his brother. He sent waves of servants with gifts out to meet his brother. What's he doing? He's fighting a battle. No, he's giving gifts. No, he's fighting a battle because he's scared Esau is going to kill him. And so he's fighting fear. He's fighting against himself. And so he sends a load of gifts out in hopes that Esau will go, hey, tell my brother it's okay, we'll talk and I'm not going to kill him. But then he didn't hear anything, so he sent another group out. 3 or 4 times he sent this out. He's fighting irrational battles to get what he thinks. He thinks he deserves forgiveness and grace. What he deserves is his brother to kill him. Now let me ask you a question. What do we deserve? Do we deserve salvation? Do we deserve heaven? No. We don't deserve anything. We deserve death. But through God's grace and his unmerited mercy and grace and favor on our life because of what Jesus did on the cross, it is afforded to us. But what do? We fight irrational battles to get what we think we deserve. God owes us nothing. God owes us nothing. He didn't have to send Jesus. He could have said, when Adam fouled up in the garden, he could have said, I'm done with this. I'm just going to stay in heaven with the angels. They're a lot less work. He could have said that. Jesus could have said, why am I doing this? No, Daddy, give me some angels. These people can just burn. This is not worth this. But neither of them did that. Neither of them did that. So we find ourselves a lot like Jacob many times, fighting these battles that, possibly stooping to dishonesty and deception to get the results that we need. Think about it. Think about it. You ever told a half-truth to sway somebody? Have you ever told the truth but not the whole truth? Or maybe this. Maybe you told the truth to someone with maliciousness in your heart and you justified it with this. I'm just speaking the truth in love. But you really intended for your truthful words to cut and hurt. You see, it's sin. That's wrong. That's wrong. It's something that Jacob would do. It's that compensation that we're talking about here. Psalm 37:1, do not fret or be envious. Trust in the Lord and do good. We just keep running across those passages, Terry, that says, do something. We just keep running up. It's almost like we're supposed to, do something as a believer. Do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. We love to quote that last phrase. God will give you the desires of your heart. But that's not what he said. Let's go back. I think we probably need to dwell here for just a moment. Now, the last of that is, he will give you the desires of your heart. We all love that, right? Love that promise. I'll take that all day long. God's going to give me the desires of my heart. Don't fret. Don't envy. Trust. Do good. Dwell in the kingdom. Be faithful. Take delight, not in your passions and your desires and your careers and your toys, but take delight in the Lord. And then he will give you the desires of your heart. It reads a little different, doesn't it? But what do we want? We want the microwave edition. We want the quick stuff. I want the desires of my heart. We want to embrace the promises without recognizing and understanding and embracing the conditions of the promise. The only thing, like I said last Sunday, the only thing that is free is salvation. And it's only free to us. It wasn't free to Jesus. But for us, once we get past that salvation piece of it, once our name is written in the book, there's a whole lot of conditions on how we maintain that. A whole bunch of them. And every promise in Scripture, every single promise in Scripture has a condition to it. You go back and you read Genesis to Revelation, you will find every single solitary promise in Scripture has a condition attached to it. If you do this, I will do this. If you do this, I will do this. I will be true to my word. I will be true to my word. Jesus has said that. God has said that all through His Scripture. He will not deny Himself. He will be true to Himself. He will be a person of integrity. He will be a God that keeps His word. The problem is the promises don't come to fulfillment in our life the way we want them to because we only dwell on the promises and we never live out the conditions. And you cannot live the promises without fulfilling the conditions. You just can't. I'm sorry. It's just the way it works. Commit your way to the Lord. Ooh, there's another one. You know, I thought we'd got past those and we were already at He's going to give you the desires of your heart. No, there's still more attachments to it. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him and He will do it. There's a whole bunch of stuff to get into the desires of your heart. The faith movement, the hyper-faith movement in this country and around this world will not tell you that. They will tell you all you have to do is name it and then you can claim it. You blab it and you can grab it. It's yours if you speak it. That is not a biblical statement. You will not find that in Scripture. What you find in Scripture is what we just read in Psalm 37. That there are conditions to this. God will give you the desires of your heart if you meet the conditions of that promise. Our problem is, because we get in this compensation concept, that we're always looking to be compensated for what we're doing. We think we deserve the desires of our heart because we're Christians. And that's not what makes us deserve it. We're Christians because we got what we didn't deserve. That's the reality of it. Let's look at the next one. Competition. Competition. Don't need a whole lot of explanation with that. That's pretty much what it is, but there's a danger. The danger in competition is you become obsessed with building your own kingdom, and you will eventually believe that the ends justify the means, and you'll do anything to win. Now, for me personally, this has been a struggle most of my life. This was a struggle for the first 14, 15 years that I was a lead pastor. Because I had it wrong. I had it wrong. I mistook what I wanted to see as a church and as a lead pastor and what I wanted to see in my goals and my ideals for what God wanted. Because it's real easy for us to fall in the trap of, well, if God loves me and if I want this, then it should be okay. It's okay with God. And it's not always the case. Because the ends don't justify the means. And we catch ourselves building our own kingdom. And it's just a very, very difficult place to be. But here's the illustration that we'll use for this. The older son, remember the prodigal son? He leaves. He comes home. You know, he was eating pig slop, and he said, I'll be a servant in Dad's house. And his dad saw him coming while he was a long way. He ran to meet him, and he said, Daddy, I don't need to be your son anymore. Just make me a servant. And Dad said, No, sir. No, sir. He said, kill the fatted calf. Let's have a party. He put a robe on his back, shoes on his feet, and a ring on his finger. Why did he do that? Because he wanted his son to understand that you are my son. And this is identification marks. You are my son. You do not wear the same things. You have the insignia of our family, the family crest on the ring. You're my son. You're not a servant. And you'll be treated as my son. And I will treat you as my son. Well, the party's going on, and the older brother's been out in the field taking care of the ranch and all this kind of stuff, and he comes back and he hears the party, and he asks, what's going on in the house? And he said, hey, great thing, your brother came home. Your dad killed a cow. Had a barbecue. We got a big party going on. And his brother starts to sulk. And he goes out and sits on the rail fence at the corral. Now, you won't find that in there. I'm just kind of paraphrasing the story here a little bit. But, and his dad said, I wish the other would come home. He's out there. He's sitting on the fence. Well, why did he come in? I don't know why he didn't come in. Well, so dad walks out and says, son, come on in. No, Dad, I'm not going in there. Well, why not? Well, because my brother took his inheritance, went to a foreign land, messed around with a bunch of prostitutes, spent all the money, now he ain't got anything, he's come home, and you have killed a fatted calf. But that's not the big deal. The big deal is that I didn't do that. I have served you. I've done everything that you've asked me to do. I didn't run off. I was the good son. I didn't taint our reputation as a family. I didn't do any of those kind of things. I didn't keep you up at night worrying about where I was. No, I have done everything that you've asked me to do. But you've never even killed a goat for me. And by the way, there is a big difference in goat and cow in the way it tastes. And I'm telling you, if I want to have a party, it ain't going to be with goat. It'll be with a cow or a deer or something like that. But here's the thing. What was this guy doing? He was in competition with his brother. If we're in competition, what are we dealing with? We have a tendency to keep score. What did he do? Dad, I didn't do what he did. He ran off, prostitutes, the whole 9 yards. Here's what I did. I didn't do that. I've done everything you've asked. I've took care of everything. He kept score. He had a list, and he just read it off to his daddy. So we have a tendency to keep score. We have a tendency to be ungrateful. I don't think I'll say anything more about that. A tendency to be untouchable. I can't say this definitively, but I have a feeling that when his dad walked out to see his older son, he tried to embrace him. And he went. Now, why would I say that? Because it's human nature. It's the way most of us would react in that scenario. Instead of rejoicing that our brother, who we thought was dead, we find out is not dead, but is alive and has come home and is still welcome in the family. Because obviously the dad had an understanding of love, acceptance, and forgiveness. The older brother didn't. So he was untouchable. He was untouchable. We have a tendency to get jealous for recognition. You never had a party for me. Tendency to be prideful. I have never disobeyed you. I have done everything that you've asked me to do. Now, really? You didn't fudge just a little bit? You were completely obedient? You never, ever, ever disobeyed your daddy while you were living under his roof? Come on. Really? I think there's a problem there. A tendency to be critical and judgmental. What did he do? Pointed the finger at his brother. He's not worthy to be your son. He's done all these kind of things. And he judged his brother. That competitive spirit. Tendency to be loveless. Let me tell you something about legalism. So this is a picture of what we're seeing here with the older brother. Because of the tendencies of all these things that we've been talking about, you see, it fits nicely in the package of ultra-legalism, where we live by a code, a set of regulations that's not about what we can do, but what about we can't do. You will not do this, you will not do this, you will not do this. And so we live in that box of thou shalt nots. And as a result of that, anyone that tries to live on the outside of that instead of reaching out to them in love, because they may be ignorant, because they may have made bad choices, maybe because life has just thrown them some really nasty pitches that they couldn't handle. And we have lost our ability to love people because of the code of regulations that we live under. Now, if you've never been around that type of legalism, God bless you, and you need to thank the Lord above that you were never around that. Because I was. And I know some of you were that. You grew up in that stuff too. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is nothing more hellish than a religious, legalistic spirit in a church, in a family. It's just hellish. It's straight from the pit of hell. And the sad thing about it is that people that live in that are so deceived that they think they're doing the will of the Father. It's Saul all over again in the New Testament, persecuting the church. Saul didn't do that because he wasn't a righteous person. He was a Pharisee. He was a religious person. He thought he was doing God's work until God knocked him off the donkey and said, "Why are you doing this?" And he goes, "Lord, why are you persecuting me?" Saul was living in legalism. And because this was a little bit different than what he knew, he wanted it squelched. He wanted it squelched. And I could tell you story after story about how that kind of stuff permeates and it just develops a life all its own, and it destroys people, destroys churches, destroys families. Thank God that spirit's not here in Generations United, amen? I mean, think about it, ladies. Would you like for us to have some people standing outside in the foyer when you walked in to tell you if your clothing was appropriate to come into the house of God? To look at you and go, "Here's a wet wipe. Wipe the paint off of thy face." Or ladies, you say, "Well, why don't you talk about the guys?" Because ladies bear the brunt of legalism. They always have. Look, I have known a lot of wonderful, godly people that had their hair up in a bun and all this kind of stuff, that had no real legalism in their life. It was just what they knew. But there's a spirit behind that at times that develops, that becomes malicious and cruel and hellish. And it damages people, and it pushes people away, and people go, "I don't want no part of that. I don't want no part of that." And that's the tendency to be loveless in there. The tendency to live a self-centered life. I want it the way I want it, and I want it when I want it the way I want it. Galatians 6:4, "But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone and not in regard to another. For each one will bear his own load." You see, the competition is based on, once again, it goes back to the crab syndrome, but it goes beyond that. Because it's about building your own kingdom. But that's not what this passage here is not about. Make sure you build your own kingdom. No, it's about examining your motive behind what you're building. Don't compare what you're doing to somebody else. Because God's called that person to do that. If He'd wanted you to do that, you would be there. You're not. You're not. You are planted here. This is what God has called you to do. Be where what God has called you to do, and examine your own work. But don't compare it to what somebody else is doing. Don't be in competition to somebody else. "Well, I have you know that I read the Bible through 10 times last year." "Well, I have you know I read it through 12 times last year." Praise God. I might have got through it over the last 3 years, and I'm kind of get paid to do it. "Oh, you don't read the Bible through every year, Pastor?" No. If you choose to do that, praise God for you. Praise God for you. The problem with reading it through every year, I don't get what I read sometimes, so I got to kind of stick. And look, I'm just being real and being honest with you tonight. I read the Scripture, I read the Bible, and I study, and I do all those kind of things. But I don't read the Bible like I would read a John Grisham novel. Actually, for me, I don't read John Grisham. I read Louis L'Amour. I don't read the Bible that way. I don't. You know? I don't read the Bible like I read leadership books. I read the Bible for understanding. I read the Bible because at some point I've got to rightly divide it. I've got to interpret it correctly. And I'm a little thick. And it takes me a little bit longer. I can't read and go, I got that. Boom, I got that. And sometimes, you don't do this. I know you don't, but I do. Sometimes I argue with God. Did you really mean that? Why did you write that way? Couldn't you have said it better? If you had said it this way, we wouldn't have all the difficulty with this. And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just telling you, these are the conversations that I have with our Creator. Because if I was writing the book, it would look different. And if you wrote it, it would look different. But at the end of the day, the work that we do has to be judged by the work that we do, not by someone else's work. Amen?